let's look at it very briefly at a mini case study. And I want us to follow the story of Jigar Shah, who's an amazing entrepreneur. Jigar aspired to change the solar energy industry. He wanted large companies to be powered by solar energy. But he had to go through a whole learning process to come up with the right model. So Jigar was working in the solar energy industry. And this is how it more or less looked, the traditional business model. Solar panel manufacturers would sell panels and installations to mid to large sized organizations, and they would be paid for those installations. There's a problem with that. Large companies were not interested in adopting this. Why is that? Because the upfront investment was too high. So that was a big pain point. Large or mid-sized organizations would not be willing to bring up the upfront investment to invest in green energy. So that business model doesn't work. And Jigar Shah experienced that firsthand because he was in the sales force of a solar panel manufacturer. So Jigar came up with a different idea. What if he gave away the panels for free? Well, that would definitely eliminate the pain point. But how do you do that profitably? Let's do another little exercise. You are now Jigar Shah. Your task is to figure out how could you get these companies to switch to solar energy industry. So brainstorm around different possibilities, alternatives of how to give away solar panels for free, but still building a profitable company. Easy to give away, but how do you give away profitably? Click on pause, take a couple of minutes, and come up with 3, 4, or 5 different alternatives of what you could do. Here's the business model canvas that you can use for that. Now let's look at what Jigar did. He said, these are the companies I want to target. And the way I'm going to do it is that I'm going to sell them something that you can already find in oil and gas. It's called power purchasing agreements. So he would go to a company and say, look, I can offer you green energy at a very competitive price for the next 10 years. Please sign with me for 10 years and you'll get energy at a fixed price, no volatility. Are you interested? Many companies jumped on the offer. They were very interested to get energy at a fixed price for 10 years because that would allow him to plan. So Jigar acquired a lot of these power purchasing agreements, which he sold through his sales force, and he was expecting to be paid for the next 10 years through power purchasing agreements. On the left-hand side of the canvas, he would obviously have to set up the infrastructure to do that. Question is now, well, how can you finance that? So Jigar thought, I have proof that I can earn money for a decade. Well, that should be interesting for investors. Turns out they were not interested. So Jigar had a problem. How would he do it? He figured out a new way to make this business model work. He had to pivot to a new business model. So what he did was, he took those power purchasing agreements and he turned them into smaller investments that could be sold through institutional investors and private banks to private investors and other institutional investors. And you know what? That was very interesting for a lot of investors because now they became technically the owners of green energy, got the payments from the power purchasing agreements, and because they were owners of green energy, they got tax cuts and subsidies from the government. So all of a sudden, this business model took off. Well, for Jigger it meant, and SunEdison, that the revenue streams slightly changed. He earned from investment fees, and he earned from the installation and maintenance costs. It also meant that he had to change the backstage of his business model a little bit. But the results of this last pivot were amazing. Jigger's company, SunEdison, became the biggest provider of solar energy in the US. And you know what? Jigger sold his company for $200 million US after a couple of years. And he's now the CEO of the Carbon War Room, which was co-founded by Richard Branson. What a story!